Today, I'm somewhere near and dear to my heart, the beautiful Buttermilks of Bishop, California. People are familiar with the classics like Evolution, Ironman, and High Plains Drifter, but there are so many more amazing climbs hidden right in plain sight. Today, we're going to be going through a circuit of these hidden gems, and while we do so, I'll be sharing a variety of tips and tricks that I've picked up from my years of climbing out here, and these are things that I think will help climbers of all ability levels make the most out of their outdoor trips. To have a little fun and close out the season, I've partnered with Kaya to set up a new challenge for you guys. I've made a list of, I think, fun and obscure boulders scattered around the main areas of the Buttermilks. Most of these boulders are from V0 to V7, so hopefully they'll be within reach of most serious climbers. You'll be entered into a raffle for a variety of fun prizes, free premium subscriptions from Kaya, as well as a free coaching consultation or just chat if you want. Hopefully just a good time and a way to explore some things you maybe wouldn't get on otherwise and have some fun with the community here before it starts getting too hot. Unlike some of the other ones, which sneak around and are a little hard to see, this thing is mega. The views from the climb are spectacular, overlooking this whole valley behind the Buttermilks. The line is really striking, the movement is cool, and it's high enough to be a heady and rewarding classic. I think the main reason why it doesn't see more traffic is that there's not too many videos of it, and at a casual glance, it looks more serious than it is. I would not and am not encouraging anybody to get on anything sort of beyond their comfort zone, but because there's such a flat, sandy landing here, and the crux is only sort of half to 2/3 of the way up, I don't think that this is too much more of a risk or even really mental challenge than other classics like the Hunk that see considerable traffic over in the Peabody side of the main area. So I've done this several times and we only have a couple of pads today, so I would recommend quite a bit more than what we have here, but you know, 3 to 6 pads and a couple of spotters should be fine. The drop from the slope or traverse is really not so bad, and the finishing move, though iconic, is really quite easy. So as with all highballs, make sure that you're up to it, but it would be hard to do a video on the Buttermilks and not have at least one big proud boulder, and it is hard to beat. It's always good to check your down climbs.
You want me to record?
Yeah, sure. It turns out you can really take rather large falls on just one thick pad. A lot of times people get really kind of intimidated by the height of things and end up stacking a bunch of pads, which certainly can help, but the really important thing is coverage more than depth for a lot of it. Like one good 5-inch pad, if you're prepared for it, can really handle like easily 15, 16 foot falls. But what you really want to be careful of is anytime there's exposed edges in an area where you think that you might fall. So some pads actually have rounded edges instead of like 90-degree corners. Sometimes people will climb with groups where you end up with pads of different thicknesses, which is okay as long as the ground is a little bit different. I've had, or at least witnessed, a number of situations where people took what should have been otherwise safe falls and end up either spraining or breaking an ankle because they land 1 foot on a hard pad, 1 foot on a soft pad, and end up rolling and sort of unevenly loading 1 foot. Just make sure that if you are expecting people to spot you, that you've spoken to them and you have a clear understanding of how and where and when you want to be spotted, and that if you're using somebody else's pads, that you at the very least talk to them about it, but ideally take a look underneath the pads and sort of hop around on them some before you get on the climb so that you have a good idea of what it is that you're going to be falling into. Our next tip to preserve skin is to never, ever, ever climb in the sun, especially in the Buttermilks or on sharp granite. The only exception, of course, is if you're shooting a YouTube video and you just climb on sun-blasted rock anyways. So, here we go. There's a really cool and I think underappreciated 6 that starts on these rad pinches here. Yum, yum, yum. And then goes through a cool, comfy jug and up through one of the Buttermilk's rare sloper encounters for a kind of a crux top out here. This thing is historically just an unnamed 6, but we've decided to call it Nibbler as it seems to fit with the low start, which is bite-sized, and the mini boulder in general. If this thing's not enough for you, the second part of our hidden gem is a low start that I put up back in 2021 called bite-sized. It has some unusual, almost competition-style movement, and I think some really cool holds. There's this crazy perfect pinch. You end up doing a really unusual like palm press dyno out of the start here after a lay down start over very comfy sand. So anyways, novel movement on skin-friendly holds. Additionally, even though we're just a few steps away from High Plains Drifter and the Peabodies, you rarely get people over here, so it's an easy boulder and set of climbs to get on by yourself if you want to avoid the crowds. All right, so in a lot of ways, sloper boulders and mantles, of which this is kind of both, are actually a lot like slabs, which I do love, but more than anything, they're quite sequential. They can feel very physically hard until you figure out sort of the right order of operations. So as with so many climbs, this boulder has a number of different betas. You can use heels, you can use toes, you can get extended and bump around. But for me, just getting a high heel hook and kind of rocking up to these slopers is, I think, the most reliable. Why are you so slippery? There we go. Very nice. Whee! It's crazy to see chalk on this thing. I'm really psyched that people seem to be trying it at all. A little bit down here. I almost always go for goal posts if I am bothering at all. It's really important with moves like this to try to get a really straight bottom arm, so you just kind of like roll up on it rather than having to pull in so hard. Nope, there it is. Bloop. Whee! Oh, it's classic. We've been talking about hidden gems in the Buttermilks, but there's a whole area here in Bishop that is itself a hidden gem. The Druid stones are guarded by a bit of a hike, but once you make it up there, you're rewarded with a panoramic view of the White Mountains on one side and the Sierras on the other. There are literally hundreds of classic boulders from V0 to V14. So if you want to get away from the crowds, get off the beaten track, and have a little bit of a more solo adventure in nature, I can't recommend it enough. I just had the pleasure of finishing the new digital guide for Kaya, and it's included with all premium subscriptions along with the rest of the boulders in the Bishop area. It should make navigating around a breeze. I've tried to give detailed descriptions of every single boulder. And yeah, it's a really special spot. Okay, this line is actually a personal favorite of mine. I guess they're all personal favorites of mine. I love the Buttermilks. Come play at the Buttermilks, you'll have a good time. This climb on the right is absolutely an area classic. It's called the Leary Arete. People have been climbing on this thing since at least the 70s, and it's for sure on the must-do tour for anybody climbing in the sort of V5 plus range. But we just look a little bit over to the side. Turns out that if you climb this thing on the left arete, it's the same grade. I think it's at least as good, if not maybe a little bit better, and nobody ever gets on it. So that's what we're gonna be hopping on here in a second. The thing that you need to look out for is a lot of times when people are getting on climbs like this, especially without enough pads, or without a lot of pads, first they'll push the pad all the way into the base of the wall. But then you have a real risk of when you fall off, you just clip the end of the pad. You either miss it completely or you sprawl off backwards. Worst case scenario, you end up hitting your head on a rock or something. So pulling the pad out, really important. Also with aretes, people will frequently put the pad under the arete. They feel like because they're barn dooring, they're gonna come flying off in this direction. But really, if your foot picks, you're gonna fall more or less straight down. And if your hands blow, you're gonna twirl out slightly to the right. So having the pad out from the wall and kind of under the fall line, sort of down into the left, is really what we wanna do. But there's this cool trick that I haven't seen too many people take advantage of. I learned about in an old climbing book by John Sherman forever ago, which is if you get a rock or a couple and you kind of spot out where you think the line is gonna be going or where you think you might fall, you can gently toss the rock and kind of see more or less where a climber might come off. It's worth doing a few times because you can get some funny bounces and climbers are terrible shots. Another real risk in the Buttermilks, he says, while climbing, is having your pads blow away while you're up on a high wall. Never ideal. Something to be watched out for. It also can get really very slippery out here when it gets windy. So take precautions. I guess tertiarily, thirdly, I don't know, talk to yourself while you're climbing. It's super fun. I always do it. Bloop, bloop, bloop. So I really quite like this boulder. Has some really cool movement and some really sort of like improbable positions. You get drawn in to this really sick xenolith, but then there's just nothing really clearly around it anywhere else. You know, there's just this whole big blank wall with just sort of one hold hiding in the middle of it. I always think it's cool, the types of things that it's possible to stand on. One of the key feat here is just this tiny little crap crystal, and yet you're able to put your whole weight on it through the crux of the climb.
I think I didn't throw it right either.
All right. Shoe confirms. So the next tip that I have is to remember that skin is a resource. Almost always when you're on outdoor trips, especially if they're shorter trips, like 1 to 3 days, you're gonna run out of skin before anything else happens. But one of the biggest things you can do to preserve your skin is strategically taping. A lot of times people will only tape after they've already kind of split and are kind of out of luck. But while this is a really important use for it, even better is sort of like taping in advance, you know, prophylactic taping. So when you're working on a project that you know has sharp holds, you can tape in advance to get more tries and kind of figure out the movement before you have to spend skin. So then you can take the tape off and try to send at the end rather than working the moves and using all your skin and then having to tape to try to send, which doesn't work nearly as well. Other things are if you have a light day and you want to get in some fun mileage on volume climbs, but you're worried about spending skin on these climbs you don't care about quite as much, you can do some easy taping techniques to let you still climb at only a little bit of a disadvantage while burning through almost no skin. Finally, there are some climbs where you're really like having to go violently to a sharp hold, whether you're dynoing to a jug or snatching a small crimp or something like that. And it can be really, really game-changing to use some tape to kind of like protect your hand in advance so you don't end up with flappers or splits or even just abrasions that are gonna throw off the rest of your trip. So this method of taping is my personal favorite and is called either herringbone or crosshatch because the tape is gonna be an X working its way down the finger. It's my favorite because I think that it tends to hold best to the finger. It has a little bit more friction on the rock, and it works kind of the best when I'm trying to still perform at a fairly high level while having my skin taped. So I try to anchor the tape on my nail so that it has kind of a good foundation. And then I basically just follow the contour of my finger, wrapping down and across, and then sort of horizontal on the back, and then up and across. So you get these kind of X-shaped patterns. And then you do another lap, but it goes a little bit lower. lap, but a little bit lower, another lap, but a little bit lower, and eventually you're down to the crease. As you can see, it's really not so difficult once you get used to it. It creates this kind of cool pattern. Because you're going top to bottom, there's no edges for the rock to catch on. The end is at your crease, so it shouldn't catch too easily here. You should have skin to kind of block it. So it works really quite well, and you can generally climb pretty hard like this to work. I would say that the biggest things that you want to look out for are trying to put it on when your skin is clean rather than when it's all chalked up. So washing your hands real quick with some water is really helpful. Starting by anchoring the tape to the nail can help ensure that you do top to bottom and don't accidentally catch edges. When you tape bottom to top, it's easy for the rock to catch on the edges. You can see as I kind of like pull my nail across here, it just kind of messes up the tape and just instantly blows off. Meanwhile, not a problem at all with the bottom to top, or the top to bottom taping. The next boulder I'm going to get on today is called Dollface. In my opinion, it's an underappreciated V4 that has some really pleasant climbing on rounded, sort of full pad patina edges that cruise through a little bit tensiony, a little bit cryptic climbing, up and right up this really cool kind of overhanging sliver feature. I think the biggest reason why people don't get on it is that there's just never chalk and it's not that well known. But the other thing is that there is a little bit of a rocky landing. I think that in reality, you fall more or less straight down onto the pad in the sand, but for the less bold of heart, I think it can still be easily and comfortably done with, 2 or 3 pads and a dedicated spotter. It is kind of crazy to me that people don't just try it because it's nestled right here in between Sharma Traverse, which is a mega classic 10, the Smooth Shrimp boulder, which has Bubba Gump Smooth Shrimp and other frequented classics, and right next to Saigon, one of the most popular V6s in the area. So, surrounded by these kind of like mega boulders. Surprise, one more tip. I actually just pulled over here on the drive home thinking about this, but I have so many friends and clients, and myself, that put so much time into climbing that they really put a lot of pressure on themselves to perform, and they have different ideas about what they expect or think they should be able to get out of a trip. So I guess as my last parting tip, is just remember to have fun, Like no matter how much time we put in and no matter what your expectations are, every time we get outside or go somewhere different or, take a long weekend or a week somewhere, you never know when you'll be back. And there's a lot of different things to kind of like appreciate and take out of it. And too many people just kind of beat themselves up over not being able to quite reach whatever goal it is that they set themselves. So, of course, if you do it, fantastic. But if you don't, we climb because we love it. We train because we love it. We travel because it's fun. So, yeah, just take the chance and enjoy yourself. Don't be too strict. Don't be too hard on yourself, and enjoy it for what it is. He subjected himself to this multiple times, man. Whew. Classic.